Welcome to Realness.
Just a disclaimer before we start. It's very important for me not to create a situation where I am falling into the temptation to tell you what to do. Because the whole point of what I'm going to say is the awakening of each of our artistic voice and ethical agency, I would call it, creative ethical agency. And by definition, for it to be real, right, it has to emanate, to emerge from each and every one of us, sort of independently, seemingly independently, or from the perspective of each creator. I feel that, that freedom there and independence is key. And I will talk about also why. But also, there is the relational aspect. And there is the aspect that, so in my book, where I'm researching right now, awakening is relational. I have a feeling that I already had an awakening in previous lives. And then I was like bored on my perfection planet and just went back into this situationship to be with the people that I like. And when I say situationship, I mean Earth, okay? I really feel that there is something around the ability to translate our realization, our spiritual realization, our very private connection with God, with Source, with our true nature, with our own depths, that there is something around being able to translate that, to communicate that, and for it to be understood and received and worked with together, that for me is something that feels really, really precious in this moment. And it feels like the foundation of a possible new organization for the structures that are currently crumbling. So whenever I say now my voice, when I talk about, let's say I talk about nonviolence, or I talk about inner work, or I talk about looking at reality as a symbolic manifestation of my inner reality, I often hear voices of like, okay, but how is it practical in solving the problems that we are now facing, right? Like literally as we speak, there is, some say genocide, some say Holocaust, some say war, you can call it in different names, but currently right now, trauma is being acted out in reality. People are being killed, and there is an urgency and an emergency of what to do. And I don't have a solution for that, obviously. But I feel that the possibility of each of us supporting each other in our individual awakening process, as well as starting to express ourselves, starting to say our truth, starting to stand up for our way of seeing reality and articulate it ourselves, it feels like kind of a weave, okay? It feels like kind of a coming together of a possible alternative. Maybe it's a parallel reality, maybe it's an alternative reality. It's definitely not going to solve what we see in the media and what we see externally. To me, it doesn't feel like it's going to solve it directly, but it feels like it's going to create a sort of alternative so that when that crumbles down, we have something to start working with to, I don't know, build up whatever else is going to come after this stage of civilization. So I want to share a little bit. I hope this is somewhat understood. And I feel it is, because like I feel it's coming through because of you and to you. So that's my sense. I want to talk about identity. I think it's there is a key there. So when we start looking at identity, we can see in a developmental sense, we can see that identity is sort of created by the ego or the self or whatever, the being, the ego's response to external and environmental pressure, right? The mother, obviously, the parents, the family, the tribe, the collective, society at large, nutrition, many elements that kind of like press and affect and touch, yeah? And the way that this developing being is navigating and reacting. That's why when we talk about trauma, we don't talk about what happened. We talk about how we reacted to what happened, or how we dealt or didn't deal with what happened. So we can see we can see identity as sort of being pressed upon us and us pushing again. So it's a kind of a tug of war of authenticity, of this emergent self, right? And through this meeting, from the internal to the external, is what we call an ego awakening, this I am that kids usually start to say around 3, 4, this sense of me, that is, Stav is now following that, so probably quite advanced by now, but yeah, it's really emerging gradually, this feeling of like me coming through this meeting with the external and the internal. And then because of the way we think about it, because of how society is organized, because we need to learn to fend for ourselves, to understand our priorities, to know what we want to do when we're going to get older, what we want to be when we grow up, being asked that all the time, for example, then there is slowly a repetition of who am I, repeatedly I'm a girl, repeatedly I'm a boy, repeatedly I'm Israeli, repeatedly I'm this, repeatedly, so I'm repeating that. And this repetition of patterns, let's say of tradition, like as Jewish people, this is how we do Shabbat, so this is how we do it. And if we do it this way, it gives us a sense of belonging. And so identity is sort of consolidated or gets solidified, seemingly solidified, just because these are choices, right? It's the choices of the ego in response to influences, or ego self in response to the environment, right? And in every moment is a choice, but it is automized. Most of it becomes unconscious and transparent. Most of us, most of the humans right now in the world, they slowly emerge into someone, and then around 18, 20, they're that. And that's it. And it's very rare to see someone completely change who they are, their life, or, sometimes there are like midlife crisis and stuff like that, but yeah, we kind of like grow into someone and expected to stay this someone throughout our lives. Around, Jung says around age 35 to 40. I think now in our days, it can get also in younger ages, earlier. There can start a process of individuation. So it's a process where the drama is not so much around adapting, around our ability to have a job, to take care of ourselves, maybe to get married, find our place in the culture, find how we navigate culture. But it becomes more about like, okay, who am I? What is happening to me internally? What are my values? What is my relationship with my soul and with God and with spirit and whatever language we want to call it? And in the process of true individuation, we can talk about a temporary extrication, like coming out of the matrices of society. So maybe I have a codependency with one of my parents. So it's around also acknowledging that, stepping out of that, recognizing that, looking at all the places where I'm automated to react in certain ways and to bring awareness, to bring consciousness to that moment. And this process of individuation, which I could, we can do a whole hours and hours to talk about it. So it's I'm just gonna talk about it very briefly. This process of individuation can be very, very painful and very scary, especially if you're not aware what's going on. Because sometimes it happens because you want it, because you read some books about spiritual awakening and you want to find yourself and you want to be an artist and you want to be free. And sometimes you just have a really crisis. And this individuation process has its risks and can be dangerous. You can be diagnosed as having a pathology and given antidepressants, blockers, all kinds of different drugs to make you aligned with the way society is expecting you to be, which is productive, right? Settled and conforming. Yeah, it's like society is offering you different, like now we have a lot of diversity, but it's just more drawers that you can pick, right? Whenever you start to veer out of the drawers, people are like, what is going on? So this process of isolation can be quite risky because you may ask yourself, am I crazy? What's wrong with me? Why do I not fit in? Why am I not like all my friends or all my family? What is going on? So it can be a really scary process, but it's necessary because through coming out of this weave, right, which is actually a weave of love, right? Because I love my mother, then I want to be what she expects me to be. I love my country, so I want to serve my country, right? How beautiful it is, It's an act of love to identify with my surroundings is an act of love, which is being I would say colonialized or occupied. Our wovenness, our very natural instinct to relate, to connect, to identify me, this is me, is being sort of like manipulated into the structures that are currently in, which are not sustainable. I could say many more words, but let's just say not sustainable, okay? So in the individuation process, when I sort of come out of this network of, let's say, automated identity threads, right? What happens is in this silence, which is not easy, but in this silence, if I'm able to create these conditions of silence and meeting myself, there is a possibility to hear my authentic voice. And this is very precious, to identify who I really am, to hear my authentic voice. And it can be a metaphor, and it can be quite literally, to get in touch with a quality of source that is my inner voice. When I was around 5 years old, I had a fight with my mother, and I was very sad, and I was crying. And I went into my room. I had a pink room at the time. And I went into my room, and I was crying, like, really, really, really crying. And as I was crying, I suddenly noticed that, this voice is really beautiful. And as I was listening to my own voice crying, I got detached from the involvement with being insulted. And I started playing around with my voice. So, I mean, that's a little tiny first encounter with my own voice, which of course later in my biography went through so many dramas. And yeah, it still is, because drama is also a way for us to awaken, right? We were talking about external influence and the awakening emergent movement as a way for awareness to wake up. Like it's not bad. It's just we just need awareness. That's all. And so, right, the connection with the voice. And so this connection with the voice is, I would say, in the sense of psyche, really awakens in the individuation process. You know, realizing this is me. This is how I can process my traumas. I can process my story, and create sort of a monad, create sort of a bubble, sort of a sacred space, a temple, many, many names that you can give that quality. I always think about like drawing a circle in the sand around me. You know, it's a mental definition of where I start and where I begin. And for most of us, it's something that we really, really need to reclaim for ourselves. And it's a creative act. So I'm going to continue. I know there could be a lot of questions, and I will leave time for the questions in the end. So with your permission, I'm going to continue. So in this moment of isolation and being able to hear my voice, I'm also able to realize my internal constellations, family parts, right? Like the way I internalize my mom and my dad and my different figures in my life and what they represent for me. And I start to realize, okay, I'm not just this one thing, but I'm many, many, many voices. And beyond that, I also start to understand that through meeting myself, I have an access to being in touch with what Jung calls the collective unconscious, right? Like the meeting with the individual meeting herself is a portal into an aware encounter with the collective unconscious, whether through imagination, through dreams, through poetic perception of life, etc., etc. And so by meeting this in what we can call internal community, or the internal all that is, I can also start to upgrade my, I want to say, codes of conduct, the way I relate, right? So like the most classical thing right now is meeting my inner child and parenting my inner child, reparenting myself, reparenting my inner child, right? But it can go to many, many other things, like, for example, meeting the inner Netanyahu, right? And having a really real and tough conversation around, first of all, what does he represent in my psyche? And second of all, is he something to be compassionate and healed, or is he someone evil that should be, recognized and also denied in a way of like, no, I don't want access to this quality in my psyche. And there is no clear answer, right, to this alchemy process of reorganizing different parts of my psyche, bringing them in conversation. And for that, there are many. We can talk maybe in the question part, we can talk about like different methods to do so, like active imagination, like painting, like family constellation, like many types of therapy. So there's a world around like creatively rearranging and upgrading the relational reality of my psyche. Now I want to talk about quantum identity. So quantum identity would be a next step of this process. It would be a realization that actually it's not, the internal is not just inside and the external is outside, and there is some kind of mirroring. But yeah, this is like because actually the drawing in the sand is a mental construct. And an important mental construct that served a particular purpose, again, to awaken, right? To create the conditions, the right environment of silence so that I can hear my own voice. But if we're really honest, this is also not the last word. It's not the last stage in developmental process. So for me, what I'm discovering now is something that I call quantum identity, which is also really inspired by the work of Paul Levy, that I will also send you a link to a great book of his talking about quantum physics, and called The Quantum Revelation. And I think it's a very great book because it explains in a very kind of approachable way what is this shift of consciousness from the old paradigm of objects and objective existing reality, right? That the whole scientific project of like everything is describable and explainable. We just need to have better, instruments, but we can measure everything, and we can create better computers that they can calculate but basically everything is explainable on the same, dimension. And then quantum physics comes and says, well, actually, no, actually the act of observation is changing what I'm looking at. My perception is participating in my reality. I'm co-creating, and in that sense, I'm dreaming reality into being. And this is an interaction of whatever is out there, you and me, right? This you, again, and it moves on a relational attachment base axis. It moves on love. We'll get back to that. But so quantum identity would say, let's take the example of trauma healing, we can say in multiplied individuated identity, we would say, okay, there was this trauma, and now I can identify that I was the victim, and I empower myself, and I know what is the truth, and I tell my story. I would say that in quantum identity, the way that I'm telling my story is actually creating my story and changes it in the moment, right? So in that sense, if we're talking about, let's say, an abuse, then the paradoxes can exist. Then, for example, I can really go into the perspective where I'm a victim, I got hurt, this is horrible, this should never happen to anyone ever again. And at the same time, this is an initiation that pushed me into growth, and without this particular thing, I would never be who I am today, and to be able to actually not make a conclusive decision that collapses reality into one narrow perspective, but to actually be able to hold that at the same time while not disintegrating, while having still an ego, having still a vessel that holds my observer and is able to relate and communicate and create in the world and earn a living and whatever, have a relationship, whatever it is. So it's like keeping this perspective of me, but being able to expand it into me and my abuser and my, anything. The story of abuse is just as an example, but really, really everything. And this is really, really interesting because we're really moving from a paradigm of linear logic that says either Israel is good or Israel is bad, right? Either this is good or either this is bad. Let's be there, you know. And then if it's good, it can't be bad, and if it's bad, it can't be good, you know. And which is what is called the law of the repressed middle. I think there is a law in like rhetorical logic. I found that out today. So the middle between yes and no, between guilty and not guilty, between good and bad, is repressed, is not acknowledged, right? I don't know if that rings a bell, this type of logic, but you may recognize it in some of the way things are structured in our world. And this two-way logic in the quantum perspective, or also the Buddhist Zen perspective, is transforming into a four-valued logic, so that something can be good, can be bad, can be both good and bad, and can be neither good and neither bad. So I can see totally my perspective. I can see totally your perspective. I can see where your perspective and my perspective are both valid at the same time. And I can see where both of us are wrong, if we translate it into relational ethical language. And to be able to hold that, first of all, in ourselves, and then in a relationship, I think that's a really interesting challenge. You know, what does it mean? And because, yeah, I can do that maybe if I talk about a trauma from early childhood, you know, from 20 years ago. But how do I deal with it when I have a conflict with you, and when we decided that we're going to go through it together? So what happens when there's actually a threat to trust, and that we're able, or that at least one of us, right? At least me, I want to be able to hold this together. And also to, if we talk about decisions, right? Like maybe in the old paradigm, I would say, okay, there is actually only one decision that is the right decision, which is your path. In this logic, we can say, well, actually, each of these decisions has a valid perspective, and still I need to be accountable for the consequences of any choice that I am choosing, right? In the moment of the collapse of the wave, in the moment of choosing a particular option, right? So for me, and that's the last point, and I would be very, very happy to also receive your echoes and your questions. And I just energetically, I want to acknowledge that I feel very like heard and received by all of you. So thank you for that. And it feels like really resonating. So I just want to add one last kind of piece, and then we're going to open it more for conversation. Yeah, I just want to talk about art. I just want to talk about art. I really feel like now, even as I say this word and I have my notes and like I have stuff to say, but I feel like there is almost like an emotion of like, guys, like girls, let's make art. Like, let's do it. Like, let's not in a museum. Like, not in a like let's be that, you know, let's be in every aspect of how we show up for ourselves, how we navigate our attention, how we talk to people, how we deal with conflicts, how we buy in the super, like, let's be artists. Let's awaken into the fact that we are co-creating, that I am walking around with expectations, imagination, that I am meeting reality from a creative place rather from a disempowered, like hands in place. For me, maybe I will share just a personal note. Like I left Israel like 3 years ago, really feeling very disillusioned and yeah, I got sort of ejected from Israel quite quickly and have been traveling in the past 3 years in different countries and really thinking of like, where is my place? Where are my people? Where can I stay? What should I do? Like, in a way, sort of a cultural refugee, I would say. Yeah, very quite privileged compared to other refugees, but still cultural refugee nonetheless. And it was actually in Thailand now that I was in November, December, and you know, Thailand is just paradise, just the mangoes, right? And the coconuts and the sun and the softness and the sweetness of the culture. Like, wow, what a place. And it was very convenient and very nice to be there. And there I felt I must return. Like I felt that I want to be closer and to be in contact with my people, with my family, with my friends, with whoever it is that I am making music for and whoever it is that I'm creating anything for. And so I came to Berlin in February, which is like, what? To do that. And like, since I've come, like, I really feel, you know, it's much less convenient than traveling around in amazing tropical places, but it feels like, yeah, like I have a really clear direction of what I want to do and where I want to be and what story I want to tell. And I don't want to extract myself from culture. So even though I feel that there is so much trauma in the collective field, and even though I feel sometimes not being heard and being misunderstood and projected on, I feel like a real calling to speak to you, you know, you guys as a representative of this you that I'm talking to, and allow my voice to be heard and allow for me to be seen, like my deepest dreams and my hopes and wishes for humanity and my grief and my pain and my despair, like all of it. And maybe in that sense, like to have a feeling that I'm not alone in this process. Yeah, I feel that a lot of us are carrying a very unique truth and a very shining, beautiful essence of who we really are, our true nature, our particular way of feeling love and expressing love, and our particular vision for humanness, for humanity, for what love is, for, you know, all kinds of different visions that we are carrying, dreams that we are carrying. And that is so precious. And I have to talk about the fact that we are not, that we are really, really in a place where it's not easy, where everything that I create is instantly commodified, instantly put into the platforms and boxes of the given culture, instantly being misread and projected upon, or mostly just ignored. So why should I bother, right? But it's almost like, yeah, honestly, like I don't know whatever else to do, you know. I don't really know what else to do rather than to love myself enough as to allow for whatever lives inside of me to be expressed and be the results, whatever they may be. It's not, you know, from voice. I know from singing, from voice, that what I'm hearing now when I speak to you, what I'm hearing in my ears is a little bit too late, right? Like my voice is already in the room. The waves, the sound waves are physically, the sound waves are moving and they are meeting the walls and then they bounce back into my ears. So whatever I'm hearing is distorted by the space conditions, and it's a millisecond too late. But if I tune into the tactile, if I tune into the feeling in the body and in the feeling in my emotions and in my spirit in the moment as I express, then I'm actually tuning to myself. And then it's this interesting tension, which for me is the real music of now, not the music of what Beethoven wrote 200 years ago or whatever. But the music of now is being both really connected to this tactile feeling of the voice resonating in my system and feeling you as you receive it, and knowing, you know, with my senses, with my imagination, with whatever way I can, to hold this unbelievable artistic tension of being both completely with myself and open and relating to you. And for me, this is what makes art sacred.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for being here. And if you've enjoyed this, feel free to connect. The links are all in the comments. Bye.